Why death precedes awakening. 5 deaths of the false self. You are not a human being trying to have a spiritual experience. You are an eternal being who chose to have a temporary human experience. And somewhere along the way, you forgot. You began to believe you were the costume, the mask, the wound. Here is what you must understand. Awakening is not an acquisition. It is a subtraction. Most spiritual seeking fails because it tries to birth the new while clutching the old. But Carl Jung discovered the sequential truth. The caterpillar doesn't become the butterfly by improving its caterpillar skills. It enters the chrysalis. It dies to one form, and then, and only then, the other emerges. This is why death precedes awakening. Death number 1, the mask of virtue, the need to be perceived as good. Consider the mask, not the crude disguise of carnival, but the polished porcelain you constructed to navigate this temporary existence. The eternal being wears costumes to interact with other costumes, but you forgot you were wearing one. You began to believe the mask was your face. Notice the exhaustion of maintenance, the moment in the room where your truth differs from the consensus, yet you remain silent to preserve the image of goodness. The relationship where your needs vanish to maintain the appearance of generosity. This is not kindness. You have forgotten. This temporary character that you are playing is not the eternal you. Jung identified this as persona inflation, the over-identification with social performance. But from the eternal perspective, you are maintaining a temporary interface long after it served its purpose. The mask protected the eternal being during vulnerable phases, but now it suffocates. We see this in toxic positivity, the spiritual bypassing that uses goodness to avoid shadow. But the eternal nature includes all colors. To be only good is to deny half your eternal spectrum. Today, permit one honest disagreement. Not cruelty, simply truth. Feel the anxiety as the mask protests its removal. This anxiety is the temporary self defending its existence. The eternal self needs no defense. Having recognized the mask, we recognize how it extended into relationships. Death number 2, the rescue compulsion. The compulsion to fix, save, and heal everyone. Consider the golden thread. 2 puppets tangled, each pulling the other toward their vision of salvation. One believes they are the healer. One believes they are the broken. Both have forgotten they are eternal beings playing temporary roles. And no eternal being needs saving from its own chosen experience. Notice your fatigue, the friend whose drama you solve while your own eternal work stalls, the family member you counsel while your boundaries dissolve. Jung called this the rescue complex, shadow projection, where we fix others to avoid our own integration. But eternally speaking, you cannot save another eternal being from its chosen curriculum. Every soul incarnated here chose its challenges. To fix them is to interrupt their remembering process. Your compulsion to heal is often fear of your own unhealed eternity. Practice holy non-intervention. When someone you love struggles, sit with your own anxiety rather than solving theirs. Ask yourself Am I offering presence or avoiding my own unresolved eternity? Release the golden thread. Let them be exactly where they need to be. Having released the compulsion to rescue, we encounter the need for temporary others to understand us. Death number 3, the validation addiction, the attachment to being understood. Consider the lighthouse, solitary, vigilant, sending its beam across dark waters, seeking recognition from passing ships. But the lighthouse does not require the ships to understand its light to shine. It is simply what it is. The third death is the release of the eternal self's need for temporary validation. Notice your exhaustion in explanation, the careful crafting of words to ensure no misinterpretation, the anxiety when your eternal perspective is dismissed by temporary minds, the rage when your intentions, born of eternal knowing, are mangled by limited understanding. You have been trying to outsource your self-knowledge to those who have forgot their own eternity. Jung identified this: ego versus self confusion. The mistake of believing your ego's temporary needs are the same as the needs of your eternal self. But eternally, you knew yourself before this incarnation. You will know yourself after. To require understanding from temporary selves is like asking the dream characters to validate the dreamer. The eternal does not need the temporary to comprehend it, to exist. Practice being misunderstood. In one conversation today, allow misinterpretation to stand. Do not clarify. Notice the ego's panic. This is the temporary self-fearing extinction. Breathe. The eternal remains regardless of comprehension. Having established inner authority, we meet the deepest attachment, your fantasy of who you might become in this temporary life. Death number 4, the fantasy of becoming, the attachment to potential and future perfection. Consider the garden of possible selves. Each flower represents a version of you that never bloomed, the success, the healed perfection, the enlightened master. You have tended this garden of could-have-beens, while the eternal ground of your being lays dormant. The fourth death is the release of becoming, the recognition that the eternal nature is already complete. Notice your future orientation, the postponement of living until you achieve the ideal weight, the financial security, the spiritual attainment. The mental rehearsal of conversations that will never happen with temporary others, the elaborate fantasies of future perfection that keep you from the eternal present. You are not preparing for your life. You are avoiding the fact that you are already eternal and thus already whole. Jung called this the Puer Aeternus, the eternal youth who never incarnates fully, always waiting to become. But to become is to limit oneself, to choose one path, and accept the death of all others. This choosing feels like loss, but it is actually the only path to substance. The unlived life, no matter how beautifully imagined, provides no nourishment. Try this today. Bury 3 imagined selves: the healed self, the successful self, the perfect self. Choose only your real, alive, present self by consciously dying to wishful, future, non-present versions. Write them down and actually plant them in soil. Acknowledge the eternal does not need them. You are already here, perfect and complete. Having released the fantasy of future perfection, we touch the deepest attachment, the identity organized around past wounding. Death number 5, the wounded eternal, the identity of being wounded and damaged. Consider the kintsugi heart. broken pottery repaired with gold, making the history of fracture visible and beautiful. But what if you have become more identified with the gold-filled cracks than with the vessel? What if you believe the eternal being was wounded by the temporary world? The fifth death is the hardest, the release of the wounded identity. The recognition that while the costume was torn, the wearer remained immaculate. Notice the comfort in your pain, the way it excuses you from the risk of living fully. The community found in shared suffering. The narrative that explains why the eternal you cannot love boldly, create freely, or trust existence. Your trauma was real to the temporary self, but the eternal self, the you that chose this incarnation, was never damaged. Only the vehicle was scratched. Jung observed that when painful experiences remain unintegrated, they become complexes, autonomous psychic contents that hijack consciousness. But eternally, you are not your wounds. You are the awareness that witnessed them, learned from them, and remains unbroken. The wounded healer archetype serves only when we remember the healer is eternal and the wound was temporary. Speak from your unbroken center today. When asked how you are, answer not from the wound, but from the witness. I am the eternal, having a temporary experience of healing. Notice the shift in your nervous system when you claim the eternal perspective. 5 deaths, 5 releases. The mask, the rescuer, the validation seeker, the becoming obsessed, the wounded identity. Each was a temporary identification obscuring the eternal nature. What remains when these die? Simply what has always been, your eternal self, unobscured. The remembrance, integration and return. You have not raised your vibration. You have removed the mufflers from your eternal frequency. Jung's individuation was never about becoming greater. It was about recalling what you have always been, an eternal being, momentarily wearing a human story, now remembering the truth. This is the sequence you have been resisting. You have been trying to awaken while keeping the old self alive. But death must precede awakening. The chrysalis must be entered. The temporary must return to dust before the eternal can stand revealed. This is not punishment. It is architecture. These 5 deaths will occur again at deeper levels throughout your temporary existence. Each release reveals more of the eternal. The work is not to achieve perfection, but to allow the temporary to be temporary and the eternal to be obvious. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But who you truly are was never born and will never die. It simply is. Rest now in the remembrance. The death of the false is the life of the real. Welcome home to what you never left. Leave a comment. Let us know how this impacts you. Like and subscribe to encourage more content like this.